This is a representative of the Living Legend Library located at the Oklahoma Christian College, Eastern and Memorial Road in Oklahoma City. This program and this project is fully endorsed by the Oklahoma Historical Society. We're today in the office of Dr. Oliver S. Willham, former president of Oklahoma State University, and now serving as president emeritus. We are asking Dr. Willham to project his thoughts on education on this taping so that it will be available for posterity. Dr. Willham. Dr. Willham, will you give us your educational background from the commencement of your schooling?
Yes, I started to school at 5 years of age at a little country school near Clearwater, Oklahoma. It's called Crooked Creek School. I went about half of the term. We moved to the big pasture in Oklahoma, down on Red River at Randalet, Oklahoma, in the February 1907. And then in the fall of 1907, I resumed my education in the school that they started at Randalet, Oklahoma.
This was a big class, I presume.
We had all grades from 12 back to 1 at this school. It was it took a lot of ingenuity to start a school in a new country, and we were fortunate there in having some good public-spirited citizens who took over the teaching of that little school in the beginning.
That isn't something. Mine came right through.
Well, you didn't run this backwards this time. Half of the graduating class who went on to college, we bragged about that some. He went to OU and I went to Oklahoma A&M College. He ended up being president of the Bloomsburg State Teachers College in Pennsylvania, been president for about 20 years back there.
Doctor, what was your college experience?
My
What did you major in?
My major field of work is in the field of agriculture, particularly in animal husbandry at that time. I was vitally interested in the great outdoors, vitally interested in food production, and particularly in the production of animals. And from that standpoint, or from that kind of a background I had, I figured that I could accomplish more there than in some other fields of work. However, I had a deep interest in other things as well. I could have spent my life studying foreign languages very easily because I think languages are very fascinating and very important. But the agriculture had a little stronger drawing power.
And following your degree, did you start teaching immediately?
Yes, sir. I graduated from Oklahoma A&M College the latter part of May 1923, boarded the train in a very roundabout way and went to the Panhandle A&M College at Goodwill, Oklahoma to start teaching the next day.
What subjects did you teach there?
I had some very interesting classes. I taught animal husbandry. I also taught some field crops and the like. I ran across a situation out there that was very intriguing to me. The age variation in my first class I had at the Panhandle A&M College was the youngest one was 14 years of age. The oldest one was 65 years of age.
A half a century difference.
Yes, sir, that is right. And it was very challenging. I found the people in the Panhandle one of the greatest peoples that I've ever run across anywhere. They're so willing to help a young person who is starting out. Another thing I learned early in life in this field of education, if you just listen a while to these people who have had a lot of experience, oftentimes they answer the question for you that they have asked you themselves. And so I found that's one very, very pertinent way to receive an education is listening to other people and other people's experience.
And when you left, when did you leave Panhandle A&M College?
I left the Panhandle A&M College to go up and finish my graduate work at Iowa State in the first part of June 1934. I tell people that I left there at the time of the Great Stockyards Fire at Chicago, and also at the time of the birth of the Dione quintuplets, but neither one of them were part of my reason for going to Iowa State College.
And did you return to Panhandle then?
I did not return to the Panhandle A&M College. I had to resign out there to go ahead with my graduate work, and I returned from the Iowa State after completing my graduate work to Oklahoma A&M College to start to work in the fall of 1935.
And at that time, just for information, what was the approximate student body of Oklahoma A&M College?
I would say at that time of college students, it was around 3,000 to 4,000.
3,000 to 4,000.
Yes, sir.
And what is it today?
It's about 16,500 on our campus here at Stillwater proper. That's not counting the students we have at Okmulgee and Oklahoma State Tech, nor the students at Oklahoma City in the branch there, Technical Training School.
Altogether, then it would approximate probably 18,000 student body that is administered from this place.
Yes, more than that. There's around 2,500 at Okmulgee, and there's around, I'm not sure, around 750 at Oklahoma City. So it's getting pretty close to 20,000.
And today it is perhaps has as great a student body as any institution in Oklahoma.
We like to feel that way. We have, by our charter, certain work to do, and I look at this whole state system of higher education. Each institution has a job to perform, and we want to endeavor to perform that job. We are known as, at the Oklahoma State University, as the People's College. We were established for the industrial classes of people, including agriculture. We're interested in the finer things in life, yes, very much so. We're interested in art, we're interested in music and those things, but we want to differentiate our work here, and we want the University of Oklahoma has some definite assignments. We have some definite assignments. For instance, they have the legal training, and they have the medical training, we have the veterinary medicine training, we have the agriculture, and so we've been very conscious of this.
Doctor, you served here on the faculty under the presidency of Dr. Henry Bennett, did you not?
Yes, sir, I did. And I got to extreme amount of inspiration from Dr. Bennett. He was a great individual. He was one of the greatest dreamers I've ever seen of looking on forward into the future and not being afraid to step out into that unknown.
And Dr. Bennett and Oklahoma A&M College, as it was then called, were forerunners in the .4 program, were they not?
Dr. Bennett was asked by President Truman late in 1950 to take over the directorship of this new program that was supposed to be operated on a worldwide basis. And Dr. Bennett accepted that assignment. In November, I became at his request, the executive vice president of Oklahoma A&M College at the December board meeting, the 1st of December in 1950.
And this .4 program is still being operated on a worldwide basis?
Yes, sir, it is still a very, very sound program. I would say one of our problems or one of our difficulties has been that because of the popularity of the technical assistance part of this overall foreign aid program, they have combined them all together, and that has tended to more or less intersperse our technical training program with economic aid, with military aid and the like, and I cannot help with my deep interest in the technical training part, I can't help but feel we lost when we merged them all together.
I believe one of your principal points of operation is Ethiopia, is it not?
Yes, sir. We have operated in Ethiopia since August 1952, and we have attempted to help His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I to establish a land-grant type of education, higher education in the fields of agriculture and engineering in Ethiopia.
Has this program progressed satisfactorily?
Yes, it's educational programs overseas. We are inclined to, as people in this country, expect them to go too fast. I would remind you how long we were in developing our higher education in this country. And there is another thing that we'll overlook too. When in most of our countries of Africa, say, in most of our developing countries, these underdeveloped countries that are developing at the present time, we have the old system still in vogue where the father of the family rules that family so long as he lives. And that means that the sons are going to be under his domination so long as he's living there, even though they may be married and raising families of their own. We forget what effect that has on the getting of new ideas into operation. You see, we educate these young people, and in many instances, because of that system in their culture or in their way of life, it's a little hard to get your new ideas into operation so long as these older people are living. And another thing we have done as a nation and a great humanitarian movement, and our foundations have done a lot here, we have improved the health conditions in some of these countries to where these older people are living 10 to 15 and 20 years longer than they used to live. And it's tended to be a little check on the progress of what education can do to them. It's coming along fine. And let me assure you, there's no greater thrill you get anywhere in the world than to see a young man blossoming out into a position where he is going to be able to develop the economy or the resources of his nation. I think I could put this, display this a little better or portray it a little better by one example. I have a young man at Jima in Ethiopia. I met him when I first went over there in 1955. When our people went over there in 52, he was a bootblack and making a very poor living because most of them were going barefooted. He running around on the street as a kid. He managed to get some education, however, and he insisted when I was over there in 1964 that he wanted to show me what he had accomplished, That young man owned a hotel, and it was a small hotel, true, but it was up in nice shape. He owned a recreational parlor, which was a good money-making proposition. He also owned a coffee plantation. He took me out to see this coffee plantation, and altogether, I estimate that young man is worth about $250,000 in American money at the present time. In that short period from 1955 to 1964, that gives you encouragement in any land. And I find in these other countries that we have that kind of youth, the kind of youth that developed our country to where it is today. You find them running around in these other countries. And our problem in education is, how do you get a hold of those youth, train them, start them off to using their energy, put their energy to working in the right direction, and that country will go ahead and develop if they are able to stabilize their government. And Ethiopia does have a stable government at the present time under their present leadership of His Imperial Majesty. But as long as they have a stable government and have young men like that, and these young men have a chance to get their basic education, I have no worry about how that country is going to develop its resources. They're going to be developed. They're going to become a part of the world community of nations. We want them to be a part of the free world community of nations.
On Haile Selassie, does he take an interest in this Point 4 program of Oklahoma State University?
Very definitely. Every time that I have visited Ethiopia, he has always given me a chance, or he's always asked for an official audience with me. He's talked over the project. He's vitally interested in what the Oklahoma State University has been doing with them. He is interested to the point that he is probably spending too much of his resources. He's probably spending a larger share, maybe, of his resources on education than he maybe could afford to at this period. But I'm very glad that he is doing it. And there's another thing about His Imperial Majesty that impresses me very much. He has studied closely Europe and our Western civilization, and he realizes that in order to develop the resources of his country, he's going to first have to develop his agriculture so that he can start to releasing a part of that 85% of the people that are producing their food out there on the farms at the present time. And then he must get the rest of his economy developed so that he can just pick those people up and give them some other type of employment as he displaces them from the field of agriculture. I think he has a very, very keen mind. I've always enjoyed and always learned something from him every time I've gone in to have an official audience with him. And really the best way to get to hear him or to get acquainted with him is to meet him someplace out in the field. He will talk English to you there.
Does he speak good English?
He speaks excellent English, and he gives you an excellent opportunity to see that deep thinking that he does in connection with the country.
Now, you operate also in some other countries, particularly Pakistan, do you not?
We have operated in Pakistan in the fields of home economics and technical training. I think we've done a great job over there. That has been started out under the auspices of the Ford Foundation, and most of it is continuing under the auspices of the Ford Foundation. However, in the technical training work in the last couple of years, or 3 years, we have gone over to letting Pakistan finance this program through borrowing from the World Bank. So we have been dealing directly, not through the Ford Foundation, but directly with Pakistan the last couple or 3 years in an attempt to help them establish their technical training schools and get them on a sound basis so they can develop skills that their people can use.
If I recall correctly, Dr. Bennett was killed on a mission of duty from Pakistan or the East.
He was killed very near Tehran over in Iran. and it was he was on a mission looking over the whole area of the underdeveloped countries of the world.
And you immediately succeeded him as acting president?
No, sir, I did not go through the stage of acting president. In January 1952, this tragedy occurred. I believe it was December the 23rd, 1951, and the board elected me as president on January the 17th, 1952.
In other words, you have served approximately 15 years as president of this institution.
Yes, sir, that is true.
Well, within that time, I know that you have developed objectives of education and theories of education that you hope are projected in the future, translated into action. Will you give us some of your thinking along the lines of educational activity?
My broad view is that we're all educators, really. I have a very definite feeling here that when we have a conversation with anybody, we both people involved in this conversation ought to leave in better shape or better off from having made it. We exchange ideas and get our education by the exchanging of ideas. And I have another very definite view in connection with education, and that is when a person enters the field of education, they ought to dedicate themselves to that, because the minute that you teach a class, when you finish up teaching your first class, you have an obligation to the young people who sat in your class and took this teaching, or you taught them for one semester. You have an obligation to them. You've got to do something with your own life so that they will be proud to point back and say, so-and-so was my teacher at one time. We have that dedication, I think, that must come into our education. Education must never become an impersonal thing, as so often we get fearful of when the enrollments are as large as they are at the present time. But we must not let that happen. It must be a personal affair. People like to be called by their first names. There should be a rather close relationship or acquaintanceship between students and teachers. We cannot teach a student too well if we do not know something about his background. We need to know his home environment. We need to know what his background is, what his possibility is, so we know what to expect of him. So teaching is very deep from my standpoint, that way of trying to research, trying to find out about this boy or girl. And always I feel that we should treat every boy and girl just like we'd like to have our own son or daughter treated there. Now that doesn't always mean that we want to give them a real easy road at all. That sometimes is very detrimental. What we want to do is give them the type of treatment that is going to develop character in them. I always like this old saying or idea that a smooth sea never developed a successful mariner. You have to have a little bit of roughness along with it to develop the character that makes for outstanding individuals in particular fields. And then again, I have got some very deep interest in education. We must always keep in mind that our education is using one of the most valuable periods in a student's life, and we should not ever waste the student's time. Everything that we do should be something that's worthwhile toward developing that student. His time is the most precious asset he has. Now, if he wastes it himself, that's one thing. But if we waste it as an instructor or as a teacher, that's another, and that's an unpardonable sin in my estimation. And then, too, I really believe very strongly in young people assuming responsibilities as soon as is possible. I feel that we have to watch very closely in our counseling system for which we talk so much about at the present time, and we're very proud of our counseling systems. But we've got to watch that we do not just spoon feed this individual. We've got to guide him in his development in making decisions, but he's got to make some decisions himself if he's going to develop. The outside world does not like to hire a person who cannot make up his mind. They like somebody that can make up his mind quickly and accurately there. And so that's all a part of this training process. There is another thing too. We must not get too far removed from the practical world. Now, I had to take the Oklahoma State University as it was when I took it over, and I had to work from there. You can't rub one of these things out and start over. You can't put into effect all of the things that you thought ought to be done. It's got to be a gradual process. It's got to keep running in the meantime. And I would say one of the greatest problems that we have to overcome today, we have the greatest group of young people, the smartest group. They have concentrated on studying. They're far, far further advanced than what I was at their age. And they're capable of doing many, many things. But I'd say our greatest weakness is that those young people have not been able to assume responsibilities in connection with work of their own, and so often the case, they have not been quite as close in touch with the outside world as we were when we were growing up, and they have a little tendency today to live in a utopian world, one that has worked out in the academic world, and it doesn't exist at the present time. We may hope for that utopian world to exist in the future, but we're going to have to live in the world that we have right at the present time and change it as rapidly as we can change it over to what we want. But we get some youth, I think, that are frustrated because of this idea of living in a utopian world that doesn't exist at the present time. There is another thing too. Our youth today are looking for leadership. Leadership from the adults, if you please. You may not feel that they're doing it as you read some of the stories and like, but remember, those stories are applying to a relatively small percentage of our youth. They're looking for leadership, but for the most part, it's a different type of leadership from what we exercised maybe in years gone by. There's a great, great change came over the world in 1215 when the Magna Carta was signed over in England, and we've been working and working more and more to where the average person has more to say in connection with his life, in connection with his government, and the like. And these young people are looking for a leadership. It's a leadership, I like to describe it, a leadership of love, a leadership of persuasion, and a leadership of respect. You can't lead the young people today unless they respect you. You've got to gain their respect, and that's one thing we overlook as parents oftentimes. We've got to hold the respect of our children if we're going to be able to influence them. There's got to be love there between the faculty and the students, or between the parent and their children, if you're going to lead those children anywhere. Then you've got to be good at the art of persuasion, and we're getting away, more and more away from the world in which we just order people to do things. I think we're bordering on one of the great periods in the history of the world. We have a lot of problems to solve. We have a lot of problems that our forefathers left for us to solve. They happen to be social problems, and they are the most difficult problems we have in the world to solve today. We have pretty well solved a lot and well on our way towards solving the technological programs in the world, and we have a good hold on technology, and we have used it to make for a way of life in this country, and for which we're all very, very proud. We all enjoy it. We all enjoy the fruits of technology, we forget that technology does one thing to us that kind of hampers us just a little bit, and that is it takes away our individual independence. I grew up as the most ultra-independent individual you've ever seen. I thought the time would never come when I couldn't make a living myself. Little by little, I have seen I've become more and more dependent on hundreds and hundreds of other people. When I sat down to a meal, there's no telling how many people had a part in getting that meal, that food, to my table there. So we've got to realize all of these changes. We've got to realize, too, in the end, in this great educational field that I'm in and like so well, we've got to remember that we all start at the same point. When a baby is born, it doesn't know any more today than it did back in the old days, 4,000, 6,000, or 8,000 years ago. And we sometimes overlook that youngster has to go through this whole gamut of training or of education to get up to where he is at the present time. He can go through it much faster than he did in the old days, due to our improved methods and the like, and what we have profited from the past. But let us remember, he has to go through that, and he's not born just with any of this information at all. He's got to go the whole route, and the youngster today has a more difficult time in school than the youngster of a few years back. One other thing that we've got to remember in our education, that it's much harder to live in a fast-changing world than it is in one that's static. And you realize today we're passing through one of the periods where the world is changing more rapidly than we've ever seen it change in past history. The changes are gigantic. Tell the world to go on, they're going to stay right where they are. A lot of them have that tendency. The young person has to ride in that fast world. And so I think we need to be sympathetic with these youngsters. And again, the greatest reward that comes to anybody in this world is to meet up with a successful man or a successful woman and feel that you had a part in developing them to where they can be or could be successful.
Dr. Willham, can you project or foresee into the future the prospect for education, its growth, its development, its refinement?
Yes, sir. As I look peer into the future, I feel that we're more and more going to have all of our people have an opportunity to have an education. Now, we are going to find that a part of this education will be toward training them with a skill or equipping them with a skill that they can sell. Now, we have two parts to education. One is that we all should be educated to live a useful life, live a full life. We're going to have more leisure time as we go along. We need to know how to spend that time. In other words, what are we going to do in our era of history to leave for posterity? What are the things that we're going to give to them? We've given a lot in the field of agriculture, in our mass production, in industry and the like, but think about what the Greeks did in the way of fine arts and the like, and what are we going to leave? We need to give some thought to that. But I feel that as we go on, the period of the educational life of the youngster is going to be extended. I do feel that our biggest problem that faces is employment. And we're going to have to provide employment for a tremendous number of people as we go on, even though our population may tend to level out here. It's going to be a continual struggle to get enough jobs, profitable jobs, going around for all of these people. And I know of no better investment than to keep these young people out of the labor market a little longer and prepare them for it to be a better workmen when they go into the labor market. I think we're going to give a lot of thought to that. And it wouldn't surprise me sometime to see us reach the stage when every youngster would have his bachelor's degree in liberal arts to start off with, then go ahead into the fields of agriculture, engineering, and those fields, and even into the field of technical training, if you please, and we prepare for life in this liberal arts course in the beginning and get a broad philosophical background there. Then go ahead and gain our skill.
And learn how to study.
Yes, sir, that is right. Learn how to study and how to live, and then to learn more how to give ourselves to other people. You know, I'm a great believer in these admonitions that were made in the early day, that you need to first study and know yourself. Then the next thing you need to do is be able to control yourself. Then the next thing you need to do is be able to give yourself for the welfare of mankind.
Willham, this has been a most interesting discourse, and I think you've advanced some ideas here that the public will appreciate very greatly, and the public will be invited